Yeah.
All right, good. Here we go. All right. Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 33, and we have with us the award-winning fantasy author duo, Dan and Robert Zangari. They're both going to talk to us about their upcoming Kickstarter, The Prisoner of Tardalim, which is a standalone classic fantasy adventure. And it's a prequel to your epic fantasy saga, Tales of the Amulet. Thank you, Dan and Robert. It's great to talk to you. And I'm looking at this. You guys are already well over 50% funded, and it's only been out for a day.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Congratulations in advance. I don't know the Kickstarter superstitions. Are you supposed to congratulate before you get to the goal, or? All right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll find out.
We'll find out. Yeah. No, it's great. So you're talking to us now from Mountain Time, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mountain Time. Okay. It's so fun to talk to people from Mountain Time. It's like it's kind of like the middle child of the time zones. It's like so great. So for some of those viewers and listeners who might not be familiar with your epic fantasy series, do you guys want to quickly kind of go over a bit the premise, the back of the book of the world that you've created?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So the world is called Kalda, and thousands of years before the Tales of the Amulet series takes place, there was a war involving dragons, and there was an amulet that was created at that time because the red dragons were the main antagonists of that war. There are platinums, there are the golden dragons, there's other dragons as well, but the reds were the most aggressive. So this amulet was created that was intended to control specifically red dragons, and it was used to help win the war against the red dragons and their followers and their faction. And then the amulet was pretty much lost to obscurity, hidden, and where our story kind of comes in is some of the characters finding out information about the amulet, and then starting to look for parts of the amulet because it was broken. It was kind of taken apart into pieces, and so the main gist of the story is these adventurers that are trying to find the parts of this amulet to basically put it back together. And part of it is that the dragons were exiled to other worlds. The platinum dragons were able to open up like a door to these other planets, these other worlds that exist. And so that factors into it later on as well. But that's pretty much the gist, I think, of the story, without getting into too much detail and giving too much away. And it follows the two old friends, Cornar and Iltar, who at the time of the story, they're older. And so they have a well-established relationship and friendship, and then they have other members of their basic party that they have adventured with over the years, that they get back together and go on this adventure. So it's like this huge quest to reforge this amulet.
Yeah, we kind of, when we first started working together, Cornar was actually younger. I think he was supposed to be in his 30s.
30s, yeah.
And I was like, why don't we just make them the same age and make them like brothers? You know, they're these great friends. And at the time, I don't think we thought of it this way, but we essentially took the wise old mentor and said, okay, we're going to make him the protagonist. And in both respect, Cornar and Iltar's line, as people read in A Prince's Errand, there is very much the problems they face are those that would face a wise old mentor that has been seasoned and that has a lot of experience behind him. So he doesn't. They're competent characters, and so I think that was the main thing when we first started out was we wanted competent characters. We didn't want characters that were kind of lumbering into their victories or things like that, to where it was just kind of a, oh, okay. So when we actually sat down and analyzed it, we're like, okay, so we did a few things. We took the chosen one trope and turned it on its head. We took the wise old mentor and gave them an actual story arc progression, and you don't really see a lot of fantasy series that are following that old mentor. Most of it's coming of age. I mean, there's some of it, like you see it in some books have it. One that comes to mind in particular is in Stormlight Archive with Dalinar. But I can't really pick any modern books that do that. I know when I was first working with my dad, we both enjoy very old movies, and by older I mean older than him. and I remember I think it's Journey to the Center of the Earth and in 2000 Leagues Under the Sea, the protagonists are older. They're, these mentors, these professors that are that they go and I think that's kind of where my dad was coming from when he initially started that story of, well, we're going to focus on Iltar, or when he first did, we're going to focus on Almar. Mm-hmm. So
Dan, we're looking at the math on your bio. You started having these ideas in your head in your 20s, and you started writing. And as we were talking before we went on the air, Robert, you saw your dad kind of building maps and things like that, and you were really young. You were in between 7 to 12, via 5, and so
5, and he was
and he was not 5, and
no.
You were, and you were not be. And so at what point? And then what happened? And then what happened, Dan, is that life kind of happened, and you kind of put that stuff away. And then Robert, when you're around 15 or 16, you say, "Hey, Dad, let's break this stuff back out again." Talk to us a bit about that evolution, because then something significant happened in this entire journey. Dan, you had something that was kind of your passion, put it aside to be a dad as well, and which is another passion. And then talk about that creation of your two passions colliding, of working with your son and working with basically the other baby, and putting those two together. And what did the two of you decide? Was there explicit decisions that happened, or was there more of an organic, hey, almost like this is fun to play with, and then it kind of turned into like novels? How did that happen?
Well, so so when Robert was a teenager, we talked about it more, and then I started actually sitting down and actually writing a story. I had the storyline pretty much laid out, and
was that in 98?
Yeah, 98, 99. And so I started writing it a little bit more and getting it more into detail. And then when he was in high school, I took what I had started writing. And so to kind of put this a little bit in a little perspective, what I was writing is now in our series, probably books 6 or 7.
Yeah.
If you think about our series, how it's evolved, it was really the middle of the the what's ended up becoming the series, and how this came about was I took what I was writing and I took it to a friend of mine that I worked with, and she was an author too, and she looked at it, she read it. Excuse me. I said, I just want you to tell me if this, how does this look? How does this read? And she came back to me and she said, actually, it's pretty good. It's a good story. I like the story, but you're starting in the middle. You should be starting at the beginning. You talk about these things and that had happened before, and you ought to write about that. So that's when we got together and started talking about, okay, how do we want to do this? How do we want to lay this out? Because there's, excuse me, there's information there that is kind of like the earlier part of the story, and that's when we kind of got together and decided, okay, let's lay this thing out from the beginning, and even that evolved. We started laying it out as we felt like the beginning was, which we started out with the Dark Necromancer, and with Iltar and Kornar, and that's when we decided, okay, let's make Iltar and Kornar the same age and make them contemporaries. And then even from there, we kind of went back and ended up a Princess Errand is actually set time-wise a little bit before the Dark Necromancer, but it kind of evolved. It kind of, as Robert got older and got more and more interested in it, I started getting more and more interested in actually writing it in terms of making it something more than just stories that we would talk about. It was like, oh no, we ought to write this. We ought to write novels. We ought to do this. And so I think it matured over time as Robert matured over time, and as he started growing up, and it became more and more of we can work on this and collaborate on this together and make it something that we could work on together. Mm. So I kind of, you kind of move. I was kind of moving from being a dad raising a son to a dad collaborating with his son on something that we both kind of had a passion for. As he was young, listening to it and looking at stuff, it never registered to me how it was affecting him. Mm. It didn't register to me because we didn't really talk about it that much. But then later, as we started talking about it later on, it's like, oh wow, this really had an effect.
I think I'm going to jump in here, but
yeah,
I think one of the big things that I notice with that is when I go and I outline something or I write a scene and I go and say, what do you think about this? And he's like, yeah, that's exactly how I envisioned it.
Yeah.
Prior to us not really even talking about it beforehand. Yeah. We're like, well, we're going to go and they're going to go and do this. And I get these visuals in my head. I'm a very visual type of learner. And so I often will get these ideas of these grand visual scenes and I'll write it out and I'll describe it and I'll say, Dad, what do you think of this? And he'll be like, okay, yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's like, okay. So I'm guessing my subconscious just grabbed it and said, all right, we're going to go plant this seed and we'll let it grow. And that's kind of, I don't know.
Is that so? You guys have a pretty good fan base. You have people that are looking forward to all your books. You have a nice group of beta readers that give you feedback as well on some of your projects. And has anybody with more of a specific eye to that? Can they tell, or can either you tell when somebody has a chapter or a character dialogue or something along those lines? They say that has Dan's fingerprints on it or that has Robert's fingerprints on it. Is there distinction between those two?
I don't know.
I would say in the earliest draft, there were one of my beta readers, a friend of mine that I know from some online gaming. He was reading it and he said, "Yeah, I could tell when this was one person and this was another." But it was mainly like style, as far as the writing style and the prose is concerned. And so, but as far as ideas of things, I don't know.
I don't know either.
I haven't really had anyone say anything. If any of our readers are listening, the beta readers, do comment because we'd love to hear that.
Yeah.
So how do you do that? Then we might have some writers, listening or authors listening and say, how do you write a book with somebody else? What's the process like? Do you do chapter by chapter? Some person do the dialogue and some people write action? How does that work? How did the two of you share the writing?
It's kind of evolved. Yeah. In the early days when I was starting, I could not write dialogue. So he would write most of it. And then eventually I kind of came into my own and stuff like that with it. And nowadays, what we used to, the very, very first thing we worked on, he had already had a bunch of things in there. So I was just going through expanding things that he had either already written or inserting new scenes that could complement what was already there. And so that very, very first edition of The Dark Necromancer, which we published in 2013, had that. Like the first half was mostly his stuff. And then the second half was all me, because he had that second half, he had left me 2 chapters of outline, which I then expanded into 13 chapters of what was in that book, which then became its own book, which is The Elven Secret, which is going to be redone and slightly retuned as Elven Secrets, since there's more than just one secret in that book. So that you could kind of see there the difference between the two of us. And now what we do is we plan everything together at the start, and then I do the majority of the writing. So the narrative voice that people are reading is mostly me, as far as what the first draft is. And then I send it over to him, and then he sticks his fingers in it, and he edits and plays around with it. And but most of the time I get feedback of, "This was great. Oh, I love this. Wonderful." And I'm like, give me some criticism here or something.
I can use some criticism.
Yeah.
This is kind of slow in some parts.
Okay.
So what happens when there's a point where there is a point of, I would say, creative conflict between the two of you, where Robert says, I have to have this in here, and then Dan's like, it doesn't make any sense. How often does that happen?
Well, we're Italians. So we yell at each other.
And then we get over
it. We usually hash things out when it comes to certain things, which we did that on The Prisoner of Tardalim.
Yeah.
The denouement was ridiculous. And I was like, okay, certain things got to happen. And then he was like, well, why don't we just have this happen? And I'm like, you can't do that. You'll destroy the entire timeline of the series. and
we can't cut to the chase.
So, I'm like, nailing all these bullet points of like, you can't do this and this and this and this and this and this because this and this and this will happen, and then this, and it negates everything that happened in this part of A Prince's Errand, and blah 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 blah, and so so yeah, we have had many sessions where we're on the phone into the wee hours of the night,
destroy the time-space continuum,
and and I'm like, okay, we'll save the argument for the morning. But
he calls me at 1 a.m. What do you want?
One of the few times I can write alone when all the kids are in bed. But yeah, usually what we'll do, all joking aside, is we'll try to look at each other's point of view, and really kind of hash out, okay, we got to step back, don't take it personal, but let's look at it as far as the story. How would the story best be served? And usually that helps us divine a right course so that we can actually get it done.
Right.
And most of the time, I mean, I wouldn't say one of us is right most of the time, more often than not. I think it's pretty even as far as what we've come to.
Yeah.
But I guess the takeaway from this is that you got to have patience with your co-author and be able to get over your own pride, that you can really see where they're coming from, because they see the characters slightly different than you. Even though we've had this bond and I've heard these stories, I know these characters, but sometimes he has a different insight into their motivations that I might not have considered, mainly because I'm younger. And I realize that he's got more maturity on him. And so I'll listen when it comes to, okay, what does he really think about this? And writing these characters that are older, which are slightly younger than what my dad is now, is helpful, because it's really is, okay, well, what would you do?
And so with that said, since there's, the level of compromise you have to have through co-authors, what's the level of compromise that you have to do for the characters? Have there been a position where like the character does something that you weren't planning on and they just kind of go off the rails and you're like, I got to write it. This is what would happen. How often does that happen?
It's happened a few times. It happened a little bit here in the Prisoner of Tardalim, and it really was that little guy. If I can find him, anyway, the guy with the wings, right there, Finch. Yeah, where he does something, and I'm like, ooh, why did you do that? And
goes off the reservation there.
yeah, but then he did something in the book that just happened, and it solved a whole issue that we were trying to figure out how we were going to make this happen, because it has to happen. Like, this was a linchpin, and he just kind of fluttered in and took care of it. So thanks, Finch. As far as other characters, in A Prince's Errand, Caesus did something, and he did something in the climax. And if if you've read the book, so for any of our readers that have read A Prince's Errand, you know what he did. And that was not according to plan. And that was like, okay, so now what? This doesn't work with what we had written before. Because we're operating with The Prince's Errand as, like my dad said, it's a prequel novel. And so we pretty much have the timelines and all the events set out for books 2 through 6, and even a little bit into 7, 8, and 9. But when we have that, it sends these ripple effects that just now have gone through our entire series. And it's like, okay, how are we going to amend this? Luckily, it'll be good. And I'm glad that Kaiessis did what he did. And I think it's going to make the story better. And it without saying too much, it's going to give us some more content that we had not considered doing, that we've kind of had in the back of our heads for something else, but it enabled us to bring it into the main series.
So talk to us about the main series. So a lot of some authors, what they'll do, they'll either start by building maps. Other people will start building languages. Tolkien wrote languages first. There's other people will create religions. There's people that create races. How did you create the actual world itself first and foremost? How did you start doing that?
I think we started with maps.
Yeah. In fact, yeah. In fact, the first thing he created was actually not Calda.
No.
It was Lorne.
Like I said, it was Lorne.
Yep.
Which is like book 6, 7.
Yep. Lorne is the kind of the Australian type continent.
Yeah, it's like a subcontinent
of the world of. It's called. Well, it's in the dragon language. It's called Kalish. I don't know if we've officially decided on what they're calling it. I think we had it at one time, but I think we might change that.
Yeah.
So it was a very simple name. But yes, this started, in fact, my dad had, why don't we show the first map that my dad ever drew of Calda.
Oh, okay. Do you have that?
I do. I have it over here in my stuff in my office. See, he doesn't keep any of this stuff. I hold on to it.
He keeps it.
My treasure. I still have
stuff.
Still have maps that were drawn back in the 90s here.
It disappears, and I don't know what happened to it.
The only thing I don't have is his original printed manuscript.
Everything.
From the 90s, because when he was starting, sorry, I'm off camera for a second, but when he was originally writing, here you go. I think this was.
Oh, that was yuck.
Yeah. Why don't you show that one off? That was your very first. That was one of your first maps.
Wow.
I don't know if you can see how well you can.
See
this, but.
And so Dan, with some of this based off of, I saw like you did some tabletop role playing, like some Dungeons and Dragons and type things as well.
Oh yeah, when I was in college, I got involved with Dungeons and Dragons. There were some friends of mine in college that were doing that, and I got involved with it, and I continued on a little bit with that. But so that was kind of a lot of the basis for a lot of this stuff was the lore of Dungeons and Dragons and that whole concept,
right,
of gaming.
Yeah, and I know we're going to be talking shortly about your Kickstarter, but has there been any? You guys got you get volume. How do you say that word? Voluminous amounts of ideas and worlds and.
There's Lauren.
Oh. Has there been any ideas of doing other medias other than write books on this? Like, for instance, role playing games, tabletop role playing games.
Yeah, he's been talking about doing a D&D series.
Yeah, we're looking at doing a 5th edition variant.
Okay,
that's. I think I found it. Since that was a.
You can do that now. Yeah, they're called. Yeah, is that it?
Yeah, this is it. So this is part of. You can see some of the original. Put it that way.
Yeah.
That way. No, other way. Sorry. I am very
Your other
disoriented
left.
See, there
when
you
it
go.
comes to the camera. So that's like the top half of that one part of the continent that was just shown. And then this is a little higher. Your arms are too short. They're all holding. You straighten that out.
There you
But
go.
I mean, you can kind of see that it sort of maintained a similar design.
Yeah.
Over here, these are the Isles of Sauroth, and their map is it's kind of similar. And then this is the Isle of Myrddin, which both of these are hanging up behind us. Myrddin's actual map is right over my father's head.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Sauroth is just over there.
See, I think what you know what you guys should do. You should actually make it like as on your Kickstarter pledge. Have one $10,000 goal, $10,000 point on there to give somebody that original map. See, yeah, you should do that.
There we go.
Oh, that'd be that'd be something.
The original, the map that
The
started it
original.
all. Yeah.
You mean that's actually worth something? Jeez.
Yeah. See. Yeah, and you'd throw in a beet salad too, just for keeping it on there.
Throwing that beet salad.
Yeah, beet salad. Only from Setabello.
Yeah. So basically, then Dan, you made maps. You made the maps, and then from there, did you make different races and religions and languages and? Okay.
Yeah, just kind of evolved it from there. Just saying, okay, we got humans, we got in the original I had humans, elves, dwarves, pretty much, and then dragons, and kind of went from there. And I was influenced a lot by Tolkien. I read Lord of the Rings, I read the Silmarillion. I've got copies of them, and The Hobbit, and so like we were talking about when I was growing up, that was big. That was the big thing in fantasy was Tolkien. And so a lot of my thinking kind of came from that whole concept. Kind of the stories, like the Silmarillion is a bunch of different mythological type stories thrown together into one book. And so that's kind of what I was trying to do with this is laying out the map, laying out this is the civilizations that existed. Now, what kind of stories can I write about these civilizations that exist in this world?
And how does the explain to the people that haven't read your books yet how, like, for instance, like the magic system works? Where's the?
I'll let you do that.
So we kind of at first I think he was just kind of, my dad was originally operating on a kind of a Dungeons and Dragons type magic system.
Right.
So I wanted to make things a little more cohesive, and it's not totally unique, but I feel like my method of approaching it is, and the idea behind why. So we decided to go with so there's a lot of some backstory. The galaxy where Calda has originated, or where it's at, is in the Milky Way we have those two kind of spirals that are coming out. Theirs has 7, and so there's a lot of important things number 7. So we decided let's go with 7 types of magic system, things of magic, and we're going to condense everything we can. And what my dad had already done, so okay, let's shovel these around and say, okay, these are going to this channel, these are going to this channel, these are going to this channel, and I chose the word channel based off of a channel of water, as if the water is, or that the magic system are these channels that the magic or the water flows through. And they flow from a particular source, which we really have not totally introduced yet publicly. But we have mentioned that there's the 7 different channels of power. Some characters call them channels of magic, and some call them channels of power. It just depends on where they're from and who they are, and they're kind of little tells in the story. So if you hear someone talking about the channels of power, they're either one, they know a lot more about the magic system, or they're not who they say they are. I'll just leave it at that because I don't want to spoil anything. But most humans, except for the mages of Elath, will refer to the magic system as the channels of magic.
Okay.
So we have these 7 different channels, and they all have different names associated with them, draconic names. They're mainly just like the small little ones. And I don't remember them all off the top of my head. I have them all written down. I actually have, when I was looking for the map, I saw my original diagram of the 7 different channels. But to put it simply, we have the arcane channel, which that has some destructive properties, but also like illusionary magic falls into that category. Like ensnaring magic that some of our characters use, that also falls into that category. And then we have the Barjan channel, which is barrier magic, and that I was trying to come up with a name. I'm like something with the barrier, and like Barjan. Let's just go with that. And then the Arprang channel of magic, which is our kind of healing magic. One thing we kind of separated from with D&D is we wanted to have all of our magic users be mage type, not necessarily clerics or priests or things like that are drawing on healing power, the healing magic. But these are all mages. So there's no real, that was one thing we wanted to disassociate with the whole D&D aspect, because that kind of wasn't there when I first started working with my dad. So we thought, well, why don't we'll make up something. So we have that channel. Then we have the elemental channel of magic, which essentially has all the elements. And so our elemental wizards, anybody that's using something that manifests from that, is going to be in that elemental channel. They're going to tap into that channel. And then we have the conjuration system, which we really get into in the Prisoner of Tardalim. We kind of dipped into it in our previous books, and it wasn't until I started writing the Prisoner of Tardalim when we sent Princess Erend off to our editor. And that's when I started getting these ideas of the Aldenal Plane and the Vizirum Expanse. And so these are the two different, I guess, extraplanar planes of existence that the magic system can tap into. And one of them is kind of like a pocket dimension, the Vizirum Expanse. And the other one is just this dimension of raw matter. And conjurers will tap into that dimension, and they can, if they're using the right incantation, they can manifest either an object or a creature as long as it matches the incantation. I guess that's another thing I should say. So all of the basis of the how our characters draw on the magic system is through their mental focus, their will, or through these magical incantations or their words. So their will and their word are the two ways to access the magic, and they have to work together in order to manifest. So you can't speed up this incantation if your mind doesn't process it fast enough. The spell will just kind of not go anywhere. To borrow a D&D sense, it fizzles. So anyway, back to the other channels. We have then the transmutive channel where, manipulating matter, and then so we got all of them. We got 6. Yeah, and the last one, the decay channel. Okay, there we go. And so that's where all the necromancy kind of comes into play, and these negative forces. So it's kind of the opposite of the Arprane channel of power. And so these destructive forces are, like one of our characters in A Prince's Errand, he uses a magical blade that he makes out of magic from annihilation particles, and that comes from that channel. There's also a Tevistral, which is a magical object that uses annihilation particles mixed with Barjan, and it creates this barrier. And that's actually in the Greater Calda 3 chapter with Kriegi in A Prince's Errand. And so those are the 7 different channels, but we have in the epigraphs of A Prince's Errand, we were talking about the Dragon War earlier, and that the leader of the Red Dragons introduced an 8th channel of power.
Ooh.
And so that kind of throws a wrench a little bit into the magic system, and it's a prominent part of the series. And so this introduction of this 8th channel is some people view it as very heretical, and some people view it as an abomination. And so, and in a way, it kind of is when you see what it can do. But
so you guys, and then looking at the books, you have you have for your Tales of the Amulet, your slated 6 books is you have planned out there. You have your Untold Tales of Calda, that's 5 books that are available. They can get now. Those are like small books that you can get now on Amazon. And at what point, I guess my question is, like, what point does the Zangaris say, let's make is there a point where you're going to say, let's make this little open source, where if we want someone to say, hey, I want to, write about the desolate lands, or is there a point where you can say that if authors want to take a part in this, is that something that the two of you would be open for, or would you be thinking about as your book and as the world expands? Is there a point where you would say, tell a story about this or things like that? Or
yeah, I think so. I mean, probably farther down the road than where we're at. So what we've got so far planned, and it actually for Calda, we actually have a lot of stuff that we intend to write, but there are other worlds, like my dad had mentioned with the Tethering Stone, that there's a lot of room that we can start writing or outsource other things. But when we started working on this, my initial idea was I would love to have, at some point in my life, an intellectual property that you could span the breadth of, like, the Star Wars expanded universe. And it's very ambitious, but I read many of those books growing up, and I loved them, and a lot of them are major influence for me as an author. But yeah, I would say probably as we're getting close to wrapping up Tales of the Amulet, where we're like, okay, we know what we need, and it might be simply, hey, you know, if someone pitches us an idea and we would say, okay, well, let's see what we got in the actual source material. Because I know with us, and one thing that we kind of bash heads about sometimes is continuity. And so we want to make sure that there's, even with our own writing, that there's continuity between everything. Like, I mean, nitty gritty stuff. I'm really into the details, and he's really more of a broad strokes guy. And so I end up looking at those things and saying, okay, is this going to work for the greater universe? But yeah, I think it'd be kind of fun, you know, some point if we get authors wanting to write little novels and see, well, here's the other thing. We can't write small stuff. we're a little too long-winded in some ways.
Yeah, we can't keep something down to below 100,000 words. It just doesn't.
Unless it's a little short story or a novella.
I saw that you guys one of your posts talking about that you're just showing, what was that, like 380,000 words on one of your drafts on that? Was that the Prince's Errand? I can't remember which one that was that you posted about that.
So a Prince's Errand was a 330, and then our editor willed it down to 325. But the Dark Necromancer that we're working on right now is going to be probably about 385.
And so, but then you bring up like what parts are, and then what parts would you say, like, not only you have different worlds, you also have different times in history as well. Yeah. So it's there's so many choices.
My original intent when I was thinking about this and laying things out was that it's limitless. I wanted to create a universe that you could just write about different things, and it just, there was no restriction. There's no finite, it has to be this way, or it has to be only this world, or it has to be, confined. My thought was that if we're going to write something, if we're going to do this, it's got to be big. It's got to be something that you can write books on it forever, almost. I mean, it was intended to be like a real universe, like something that could really exist. And if something really exists, the possibilities are limitless. You can write stories upon stories about different aspects of different characters and people and different worlds, and just not have any boundaries on it.
Right. So let's we should talk about your Kickstarter. So so let's pull up the Kickstarter, and as we say, we're looking at this. You got, you're already well over 50%. It's already a day in. So yeah. So talk to us a bit about, what your readers, what your fans, what your new fans, and what your new readers can expect from this Kickstarter, and what they could get from it.
So we have all 4 editions of the Prisoner of Tardalim available as rewards. The big one is what's on the wall. This 24 by 36 canvas print of Kareem Bayat's cover art. And that's on, I believe we have 10 of those that are available. Unless somebody's already backed. I haven't looked at the Kickstarter page in about 2 hours. And that tier is going to get you the hardcover edition of The Prisoner of Tardalim, the audiobook that's going to be narrated by Michael Kramer, and then the ebook. And you'll also get all the extra free bonus content things. We have a couple different bookmarks and a mini map of the world. And if you scroll down just a little bit on the other side of the campaign, that picture there kind of shows all the different rewards.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
that one.
Wow, look at all that stuff.
So all of that will be in that tier, as well as the extra digital content. So for everyone that backs the project, we're going to be giving the companion story Helleron's Awakening in ebook format, and that book actually it's novellicized. I'm still working on it right now. So my intent was just to kind of give me something easy to work on during the Kickstarter, because I'm doing most of the work on it. So I'll do all the advertising, the outreach, and that takes up a lot of time. So I figured I'll just work on something small instead of trying to take off a big chunk of the Dark Necromancer, which we're working on right now. But everybody's going to get that story for free.
Wow.
Initially, like what we did for our last campaign was, if you sign up for our mailing list, we'll give you A Thief's Way for free. But we decided, you know what, everybody's gone through a rough year. Let's just give everybody something that we as authors can afford to just give to our audience.
Right.
And so Helleron's Awakening is that story. Also, when all the stretch goals, which if it keeps trending how it is, we'll probably punch through those stretch goals. But we have 4 other smaller stories. They're going to be like the size of Untold Tales of Calda, those little shorts, and they're going to focus on each of the main characters. Well, we have one main character. All the ancillary characters that are in the novel. So we have Omdel Ramian, who is this guy here. We're going to have a little story about him that takes place just before the events of the novel. That can be is going to be one of the stretch goals. And then we have one for VM, who is at the beginning. If anybody's read the intro, the little sample that we have up there, she shows up in the first part. She's kind of the catalyst for this adventure. And then we have Ilden, who is Omdel's best friend. And his one is going to be a little more focused on Sauroth. And so that one's actually, I was thinking about that the other day. And I was like, okay, I think I know where I want to take this. I do a lot of little foreshadowing for what's going to happen in the Dark Necromancer in this little short story with Ilden. So I hope we get through those stretch goals so I can spend the time working on that story, because I'm like, ooh, I like this. Even though it's homebound and it's not really adventure-y, but there's a lot of intrigue in what I've got planned out for that one. And then I have an idea for Phaelinia, who is the love interest for our main character, and it'd be hers will be more adventure type, and be able to show her. She's pretty awesome. She's one of my favorite characters I've ever written about. She's great. And so those will be free bonuses once we hit those stretch goals. And they'll be given to every backer. So even if you just pledge $1 and we hit those stretch goals, you're going to get 5 ebooks.
Wow. And
based off of my projected word count, I'm thinking it's going to be around probably around 60 to 65,000 words, which that's the length of most smaller novels. Um, not one of our smaller novels. This is one of our smaller novels.
Yeah.
You know, originally I was planning for this to be between 100 and 120,000 words. And I had it planned and outlined for that to happen. And then I wrote the first part. And I got to the inciting incident, and I got to the first try-fail cycle. And I looked at it, and I'm like, okay, this should be 25% of the story.
Right.
And it's 25% of the story at 45,000 words.
Jeez Louise. Yeah, you like you said, you guys write a lot. You love big books. Yeah.
So, you know, and it's interesting. So our books before were smaller, but we were not really going in depth with the character penetration. And so it was the way that we wrote before was it was an omnipresent, but present tense. So a third person, omnipresent, present tense. And while we enjoyed that, it kept it very fast paced. It didn't really lend too well for character introspection and internal dialogue. You couldn't really get micro beats in there because everything's just happening so fast. Right. And it made the adventures fast paced, and you could fly through them. And so I thought, well, you know, when I originally was looking at A Prince's Errand, I thought, I don't know if I can stretch this into a novel. Maybe I can get it up to 90,000 words. Maybe. And the smallest book we had written before that was 110. But our other 3 novels were about 150 range. Yeah. And then it turned out to be 325,000 words. So, yeah, I don't think we had a problem. But it was that switching of the style and being able to get more character introspection and to kind of slow the story down that allowed us to gain some insight into things that kind of made it explode.
Right. Yeah. Well, this is looking great, guys. I'm really excited to do a deep dive on this and read more. It's, as I said, the two of you have created a fantastic world. And as you were saying earlier, Dan, it's limitless. The very fact, I think what's one of the smartest and the coolest thing you've done that kind of takes this piece out of your normal science fiction fantasy is that you've created it's different worlds. There's there's different, so it creates a giant sandbox to play in. And watching the two of you talk about this, you're grinning ear to ear about the stories that you've told about it, and your enthusiasm as writers translates so well to the page. So on behalf of your other fans out there, thank you for doing this. Thank you for this new Kickstarter. And I do not see. I'm excited to see where else you're going. So, where can people find your work?
So you can find them. All of our ebooks are on Amazon. Right now, we're in the process of getting the Untold Tales of Calda shorts and The Thieves' Way released wide. Prince's Errand, though, is available in paperback and hardcover, widely distributed. So if you go to Barnes & Noble, they'll have it there on the website. The audiobook is currently exclusive with Audible, but that means it's available on Amazon, Audible, and on iTunes.
Okay.
The Prisoner of Tardalim also will probably be available wide. I think we're going to go that wide distribution route after about a year. Kindle Unlimited is a great idea, but we're reconsidering the exclusivity there. And I think where Kindle Unlimited really shines is when you have a larger series with smaller books, and that's not what we're working on right now. Well, we have several 100,000 page reads going through the novel since its launch. I personally feel like we should distribute it wide. So it'll probably be about the end of the year when we're going to be able to get A Prince's Errand and available on Nook and Kobo and some of the other websites.
And they also can and they also can find you. You have your website, legendsofkalda.com, correct?
Yep. Legendsofkalda.com is KALDA is where we have all of our publications are listed there. I think I actually have to update one of the pages for the short stories, but yeah, you can find everything there. You can get access to our readers list or readers club. We give away a free, it's about 18,000 words. It's kind of like a short story-ish. It's a little longer, but you can get that. Yeah, you can get that for free when you sign up on our mailing list, and that I believe should be a pop-up unless I accidentally broke the website the other day when I was updating it.
Oh no, it popped up. I think it only pops up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think when you first go to it, it pops up. But if you're looking to grab that short story, it's just legendsofkalda.com/newsletter.html, and you got to have the HTML on there for some reason. Our hosting service is weird that way. But you can get that for free. And that's just a short couple-hour quick read if people want to have something to enjoy.
Right. Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Dan and Robert. Fantastic. Thanks. And as I said, once again, thank you. And I look forward to following your Kickstarter as well. So,
thank you, Barney.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Welcome.
Appreciate the time.
All right. You guys look good. All right.
Good.
Did you have a makeup artist come in and prep you for this? So.
No, I just woke up from a nap.
Yeah, I know, me too. This is a beauty sleep. This is freshly napped.
Yes.
You have like your agent and your lawyer behind the screen, just making sure to sit right.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Just picture like someone with a clipboard saying, "Ask this question."